It's funny actually. I bumped into an old interview I did after a gig in British Columbia, over on the
Mm.
west side of Canada. A great little musical theorist came and interviewed me, and was asking me about this kind of thing. And I was it was about 4 or 5 years ago, and he caught me on the hop. But I was talking about how. I mean, you talk about classical there. I was classically trained, so there is that
Mm.
grounding there. But then I turned my back on it at a vital moment when I was about 14. I hadn't really been exposed to anything other than classical music, because those around me, like my mother and my piano teacher, saw a talent, and they channeled it. So it was Mozart and Bach and uh, on all the obvious. Shostakovich
Mm.
was a personal favourite of mine, but I had this sort of this. I didn't have a passion for music at that point. I felt it was just being drummed into me, and I wasn't really choosing my path. And then I joined a soul band when I was 14. A friend of my mother's was starting a Blues Brothers covers band for a charity night, and him and
Nice.
his mate were in their mid 20s, and I was 14. And my mum said, "Oh, my son's a keyboard player. He could be in your band." So I went along to this thing. It was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. There were two bass players. There was, I think, at original rehearsal, there was just a drum machine that they were sort of blatting out of a PA speaker, and I was just like blown away by this onslaught of other music, and then and then consequently doing a gig in a, I don't know, like a working men's club or something, wherever it was, about 3 weeks later, and I got to stay up till 2 o'clock, and I thought, wow, this is all right. Actually, music is quite something, and I do have a thirst for it. And then it was just the autodidactic path of teaching myself everything beyond Shostakovich. I just fed and fed and fed and fed James Brown and on, and James Brown and beyond, and so there is this classical underpinning. Then there's this sort of self-taught, soulful jazz funk thing that really is my passion, and then and every which way that's morphed, and then that's sort of the obvious path for that was into dance music. But I was telling this guy that. In the old trio stuff that I used to do, there was always this quest to sort of. I'll put this down. Sorry, there was always this
That's fine.
quest to make it musically challenging, in the sort of in the underbelly of what we were doing. So there was musical. I'm not a great musical theorist. I never really know what it is I'm doing, but there's a quest to make it challenging and make it sort of push the realms of what I think is possible, and yet make the right hand simplistic and appealing. Because music without empathy and without emotion seems pretty pointless to me. If you're going to
Mm.
be clever, or if you're going to amuse yourself with clever things, it still has to have that pathos. It still has to have that thing which just reaches out and touches you. And I was telling this guy, I was saying, that seems to be the permanent quest, is to play this, hopefully a beautiful melody in the right hand, and in the left hand, do all the clever stuff. So it's a bit like a duck paddling. There's feet going crazy, but on the top, hopefully, there's a beautiful duck or a beautiful swan floating along.
Yeah.
And But when you say classical and jazz, I suppose, yeah, it's all in there. I hope to. My quest is to be permanently morphing into from one thing to the next. And there's a discipline, and there's an art to everything. All genres of music and all approaches. And I'm
Mm.
certainly no snob on that regard. There's beauty
Yeah.
everywhere. But anyway, it's lovely that you say you've been listening to it, and yeah, it's been the last 3 or 4 years. I having finished one project on to the next. It's been a long hiatus. I'm only just beginning to put stuff out now. I've got an album coming out in whenever it is. They told me today, and I can't remember, but in a few months. And so there's a coming forth of new music, and it's been this has probably been the longest between albums for me for about 10, 15 years. It's been a long period of exploration, and it's been very much a solo thing. And I don't know if you've seen it, but there's this video that we did in a warehouse during the lockdown with about 53 televisions, and We've
Yeah, is that the one that you can get? I mean, it seems to be on Apple Music as well that I've been listening to it, and is that the official video that you did for the album?
there's sort of 4 tracks. It's a sort of a
Yeah.
15-minute long piece, and I have a studio in Chiswick in West London, and there's a technical department there, and I came up with this idea that I wondered what would happen if the piano could play the televisions,
Mm.
and so there's a pickup called a a helping still pickup, which is made in Texas. A guy called Mr. Helping Still who makes this pickup, which is a magnetic microphone that sticks to the back of the piano, and you can
Mm.
hear the piano without using microphone, so there's no feedback. And you've got a jack, like a normal jack plug that you plug into a guitar. You've got it at one end, and I thought, and I've been using that to put into guitar pedals and make the piano do mad things. And I thought, I wondered if you could create a lead that went from jack to RF aerial, which goes into those old TVs that you grew up with.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And we tried it, and sure enough, it worked. So when I played the piano with this thing, and I plugged this thing in, I'd bought all these. I bought about 15 tellies on eBay, old black and white TVs, and I played a chord into them, and they had all that static on, and then all the static formed into lines like that. So you had for low
Oh
notes they
wow.
were thick lines, and for high notes they were thinner lines. And I realised, wow, I'm playing the TVs.
Wow.
So yeah, so it's cool. So that video
Yeah.
is a sort of manifestation of that.
When I saw that, like I thought, okay, this is sort of an artistic depiction of the kind of thoughts and feelings he has, as he's going through making this album, telling the story of the album. But I didn't realize that that was actually, you had created this actual device, which is so. Is it as much a part of the sound of the album as it is a part of the visuals of the album?
Well, I think the idea behind it is, you see, when you're in a 3-piece outfit, for instance, as I was, you draw feelings out of each other. You connect with both the other guys, and so you convert that emotion into sort of currency, if you like. You convert
Mm.
that coming together of emotion and you project it onto the audience you're with, and that means that you can. It gives you courage over time if you've got that chemistry working. It gives you a courage. It gives you the courage to go on stage with very little planning and just trust that you'll feel it and you'll be able to push something out. Um, and this project is me on my own, and it's been worrying me. I've been thinking, well, how do I conjure that up? I've got no one to bounce off, so how do I conjure that up? And I like most people, I've remembered times in the past when I've sat at the piano and there's been some visual going, and I've been inspired by that visual, and I've felt myself going to some sort of transcendental state, looking at it and thinking and reacting to it. And
Mm.
and again, this is what happened. The soundtrack composer, for instance, is always reacting to the music. Soundtrack composer sits down, looks at the visuals, and then is the afterthought. So he's always the afterthought.
Mm.
So there's 2 things there. The first thing is the usual cliche that the soundtrack composer or the musical creator is the afterthought when it comes to visuals. And secondly, wanting to have something that conjured up emotion and maybe bounced back at me and inspired me onto certain feelings and made me react in certain ways. And uh, so this little contraption kind of it subverts the first thing. So in actual fact, my piano is creating the visual rather than the other way around. For once, the image is slave to the music. In my
Mm.
field, for once in my experience, I'm manipulating the image rather than the image is manipulating the music. So that's quite powerful. And then also, as I play and these TVs react and they change for me, it feels like a person. It feels like something is responding to me and reacting to me and he's chucking something at me and inspiring me to move on to the next bit. So it kind of works in 2 ways, really. Um, and the theme of the album, to a greater extent, is the story of the last 3 or 4 years. In that I decided to go off on a new path and on a new quest to find new sounds. And essentially forgot the piano, and the piano just sat in the corner of the room, kind of waving at me now and then, going, "I'm still here when you need me," And I've done this my whole life, that's just something that is me. And I went so far off in another direction. I bought one piece of equipment after another piece of equipment, learned how to use that, for about 3 or 4 days, madly playing that, created a piece of music and thought, yeah, that's good. That's great. That's really exciting. But is it me? I don't know if that sounds like it's does that sound emotive? Is there any of me in there? And then I go, okay, well, get rid of that and then get another one. I did this for about 2.5 years. And then I decided to get out of myself and go to Berlin. And I went to work with a producer friend of mine in Berlin. And we hired a studio called the Funkhaus, which is the old East German radio station, with a beautiful piano in it. And I sat down at a piano and played. And because of the beautiful acoustics and because of the amount of time I'd left it, I mean, bearing in mind that my hands were starting to hurt from lack of use. Like when I played the piano, they were starting to hurt because I hadn't, kept them active, which is a horrible feeling for me. Like, Christ, what would life be like without that? Anyway, I sat down at this piano and the music just sort of came flying at me, and I recorded so many tracks in that one afternoon, having laboured for about 2.5 years to try and create something. I then sat down at the piano and realised that was still my best friend, but had also the piano has been my best friend and my worst enemy throughout my life. It felt like it. Because of the rigors of learning it as a kid, I felt like I lost my childhood to some extent to it, or rather wondered if I had. Did I lose my childhood because of the amount of hours I put in as a child learning how to do it? And then aged 14, as I mentioned before, I joined this band, and then all of a sudden the world opened up to me and I got to play with amazing people and see the world through it. So then I loved it again. And then, when I fell out of love with it for the last 2 or 3 years, the weight of it, the weight of having this thing, I don't, it's one of the, I'm not the sort of person who feels particularly confident in many areas. I'm full of self-critique, but when it comes to certain elements of the piano, I think, well, actually, I'm pretty good at that. It's almost not my doing. It's just something that is.
You sound like a true musician having that self-critique constantly.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It's just. It's an endless. I mean, the self-critique thing. I mean, yeah, we can talk about that. But so it's always been a weight. The weight of it, the weight of being good at it, and then also that question of what am I without it? Any musician. What am I without that instrument, or what am I without music? I mean, this whole pandemic situation has shone that light on us, because none of us have been able to gig either, and it asks you the question. If you take that away, what are you? And it's not very nice. It's not a very nice thing. You are essentially an unemployed person. That comes with a lot of psychosis. And then the thought, the peril that maybe you won't be able to do what makes you feel valid is frightening. So I kind of did it before the lockdown, and now it's happening again. So I'm chomping at the bit, to get back.
Absolutely. And it's going to be so good once all this is kind of blown over, and musicians can get back. I know that in Australia it's already happening. A lot of musicians are getting back into it, and just because we've been really fortunate over here. But on the note of that album, so it's called what's your new album called?
Called Hall of Mirrors.
Hall of Mirrors. I had it written down here, but the particular song, Hall of Mirrors, the particular song that obviously you've released one song, at least in Australia. She Lives in Golden Sands, and man, when I came across that song, it just hit me. Like some music, because I just like to explore and see different playlists on Apple Music, and what stands out to me. And occasionally there will come a song that is just so good that I will listen to it on repeat, throughout my creative process or for inspiration for weeks, and I still haven't stopped. That piece is just, it's killing me. It's just so good. And so, I'm so excited to hear the rest of the album, but there are a couple of things that you mentioned earlier on, which I really want to dive into. Firstly, want to delve into this idea of pushing the boundaries within your creativity and within your performance, so almost so that you have to kind of reach a new level yourself. Because I've certainly found that in my own creative process, one of the best things that I can do is imagine what it is that I want to hear through the piano, or the song that is in my head that I really want to get out. And likely it's going to be, for me, because I'm only just really rediscovering my love of piano, for me, it's definitely going to be far too difficult for me to handle. But that's, for me, it seems like lately it's been the best thing ever, because you sit down and after 6 or 7 hours, you can play something that you couldn't play, 6 or 7 hours ago. And that's because you create something within your head that is far too difficult for you to conceive at the moment. But as you play around, suddenly you rediscover these pathways to getting to that sound. Is that similar to the way that you've kind of approached it with your own creativity and pushing it to the next level?
Well, what you referred to there, I certainly recognise that transition. I'm terrible at sitting down and practicing. I do it so rarely, but actually practicing before you compose is the best thing. After about an hour, certain things just click into place, and I find that, for instance, if I sit down and because you as a pianist, you're looking for good technical springboards. So I've got them all just behind my screen here. I've got a big bookcase of Bach and Mozart and Hanon and Dochnani exercises and these things. But the best things to start with are sort of Bach and just some Bach thing that kind of just ticks a lot of boxes and gets you sort of running around the block, as it were. And then I find, having done that and sort of laboured through it and maybe perfected a few passages, all of a sudden this improvisation thing kicks in, and I think, oh, hang on, a bit like sort of Michael Nyman used to do with old Purcell stuff when he'd do a Peter Greenaway film. You find a little passage, you go, oh, that's quite a good little springboard, and that makes me think of something else. And what happens? And then you suddenly find you're playing like this sort of contemporary Bach spin-off, and so and you talk about pathways. I mean, pathways in the brain. It's interesting. My daughter's learning the drums. There's a drum kit just over there. My daughter's learning the drums, and it's amazing how quick the young brain creates these pathways. I don't know if you've seen the work of Ian McGilchrist.
McGilchrist. I'll have to write that down.
Ian McGilchrist wrote a book called The Master and His Emissary.
I've heard of the book, yeah.
Yeah, it's a right old tome. It's about that thick, but he talks about the two sides of the brain. He's done a sort of 20-year-long study into it. He lives up in the Isle of Skye, I think, right in the north of Scotland, and he's studied this two halves of the brain thing, which is, in his own words, has become a bit of a hackneyed conversation. Oh, my left brain is telling my right brain to do this. He said, but actually there's some good science in there, and he thought he'd try and find it, and he's come to the conclusion that there are two very different sides of the brain, and they have different roles. I mean, it's complex. It's going to be way more complex than I could even begin to explain, but in very simple terms, he cites this scenario where you're, for instance, in a hotel room on the other side of the planet, and it's the middle of the night, and you hear a noise in the bathroom, and you wake up, and you walk towards the noise. You walk towards the bathroom, and as you're walking towards the bathroom, your creative brain, let me get this right. Your right, because I'm left-handed, and that's creative. So right-hand brain, your right-hand brain gives you it serves up all the possibilities that it could be. So it could be a dragon or a ghost or a robber, and all these scenarios go on. And then by the time you eventually put the light on and go towards it, and you see that it's just something that's fallen off the shelf, your left-hand brain, which is the part of the brain which gives you such security and stores all these processes that your right-hand brain has served up, you realize that it's something very simple. It's not frightening, and this is what your brain continually does. It's introduced to these new things, which the creative side of your brain experiences, jumbles up, throws out all sorts of theories. It's really exciting, the right hand side of the brain, and then your left hand brain goes, calm down. It's not what you think. We've seen this before. And then it makes you understand the patterns and makes you able to deal with it. If it was pure right-hand brain the whole time, you wouldn't get anything done. You'd just be constantly wandering around like someone who'd just been trepanned, like seeing it, had a hole drilled in their brain, just to sort of this permanent, like, new perception. But it's really interesting, the pathways. I only mention this because you talk about the pathways, which is a great word. And I often think about the pathways that have been etched into my brain at a very young age through practice. And what is that link between physical practice and what the brain remembers and what it enables the brain to do? And I think it's no coincidence that I think musicians tend to stay young in mind and young of mind. I'm completely convinced that it wards off dementia and things like this. I have no proof, only a sense that it wards off these sort of debilitating brain things, perhaps more in musicians, that we're more capable of doing that because there's such complex pathways and these connections that we make. I'm fascinated by them, and I'm fascinated by the way they make us think. I'm also fascinated by the way it makes us totally, I'm being very general here, but it tends to make us extremely neurotic, quite edgy, and quite insecure, and generally speaking, kind people, thoughtful people, sensitive people, generally speaking. And there seems to be a list of attributes that come from this sort of this process that we go through. It's a screw up, but it has its assets. And that's a very long-winded and quite a distant removal from your question.
No, I love it. And no, seriously, this is such an interesting conversation. I think that particularly for people who are listening on my podcast, because it's, we're delving into things that have a little bit to do with music, but also, broadly, you can take these kind of thoughts elsewhere. And, one of the most important things that I learned from one of my classes this last year at university was just the fact that when you play music, what's happening is you're actually utilizing all these different parts in your brain are lighting up, and it's creating those pathways between all these different parts, and that's actually one of the theories behind why music could be so therapeutic for people with Alzheimer's, for example, because all of a sudden when they're listening to music, all these connections between the parts of their brains start lighting up again. And so all of a sudden they can remember some certain things and certain details. And that's just one of the most beautiful facts that you could ever learn about music and what it should do for us. It's like, this is so important. And I mean, I just encourage everybody who I talk to, whoever played an instrument or is thinking about playing an instrument or picking one up, it's like, no matter what you do, learning an instrument is going to be beneficial for your mind, your mental health, and for your career, whatever it is. Like it's math, it's creativity, it's everything. It brings it all together.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But it's such a primeval language as well, and it's the most, it's in some senses it's the most simplistic language. I mean, in Western harmonic terms, it's 12 notes, and yet we seem to make this. It seems to produce such results with such a small vocabulary. It's a very strange thing. It's also it works, like you say, maths. That's an interesting one. Yeah, it is very mathematical. And yet I wouldn't cite myself as a great mathematician. If you show me my son's doing algebra, Christ, algebra again.
Oh yeah, 20. Me either.
Oh Christ, okay. A equals and yet I do feel in tune with the maths of music. Now I don't know how that differentiates from your standard comprehensive school, senior school level maths, but there is a maths in there. Also language. I've tried language. I can't, as in French and other languages. Tried some Japanese once. I can't. It doesn't seem to lodge, and it's almost like I'm reticent to say I'm lazy. I'm going to pretend I'm not lazy, but I think that I think there is something in me going, well, I've got music. I mean, why do I need other languages? Because this says so much more than words ever can. Um,
Mm.
and it does. And but that's one of the reasons I play instrumental music, is because I don't want anything to come in the way between me and someone who doesn't speak my language, or I don't speak theirs. I just want, I'm looking for something, um, yeah, subconscious and primeval, and something that's, it's an odd thing, isn't it? I mean, I've seen people talk about it in terms of, low notes in very simplistic Neolithic terms. Low notes represent danger, and big animals and big
Mm.
spaces and big caves, and then high notes denote, well, I don't know what high notes would denote, but like that's the language that we're tuning into. I'm not sure, because I get great comfort from low notes. Low notes make me, cradle me. I like when there's a
Mm.
low note vibrating, I feel, I'm just like, I'm in someone's arms. And there, that's an interesting, what I just said there, in a sense, is that's true. The sound of a particular passage or a harmonic or a tone can cradle me. So that
Mm.
there's something way beyond words. I mean, words can quite often. We laugh in this house about how words have evolved, and words tend to have this. You can almost hear their lineage. Like when you say ball, you can understand why someone would call it ball, because
Mm.
ball kind of sounds like it looks, doesn't it? Oh, it's a ball,
Yeah,
boom. But
yeah.
you get those kind of, those vowels, those consonants, those noises, and it's
Mm.
like music. It's like 15 steps even further. It's so, and it's remarkable that most people can communicate with it, and they have no idea how it works. You don't need to
Mm.
know how it works. It's such a ridiculous thing. It's such a, and I tell you, in a funny way, I don't even know. I still can't identify whether I want to be a musician for a living. I mean, I've been doing it. I've been doing it for 30 years, and I still don't know if it's what I want to do when I grow up. I just think that it picked me up when I was 15 and just went, "You're coming with me," and it's given me such amazing gifts of meeting people. It's so not even about the music. I mean, I've been to, the depths of the most fascinating parts of Africa and Far East Asia. I've been to Australia and New Zealand. I've been to South America. I've been to America. I've been everywhere because of this music thing. And it's almost, I still feel like I'm still on holiday. I've just left school and I'm
Mm.
still not quite, I don't have to buckle down, and I never will. I mean, I'm never ever going to do anything else. I don't care what happens. But it's just, it definitely picked me up and took me. I've got so little choice in it. Music is just it's the boss. I don't know.
Mm.
I'm just a pawn, really.
Yeah, I mean, I was about to say, I mean, it sounds like the way that you're describing it, it's almost like you've got this judgmental God sitting above you. And it's and it's like, create something, create something. If you're not creating something, I'm going to judge you constantly. Or, but I really like this idea of, and I've been thinking about it so much lately, this idea of music saying things that you can't possibly say with words, because as somewhat like this podcast is all about philosophy, the practical Stoic anyway, and so I'm reading a lot, and I'm doing a lot of writing as well, and last year I had this creative process where I wrote this book, but then somehow found myself recording this this piano music alongside it, and the I came to a similar kind of idea, which was that, okay, the music is supposed to be an accompaniment to the book, because it's supposed to tell the story that couldn't possibly be said with the words, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this idea that I've been kind of mulling over, which is, I'd really like to get your opinion on this. So when I look at the philosophers of the past, it seems like the job of the philosopher is to look around and also look deeply within and just tell the exact truth about what he or she sees. Here's what I see out here. Here's what I see in here, and take that and do what you will with it. And it doesn't have to be fun. It doesn't have to be comfortable, but here it is. And I feel like the musician or the artist in general is playing almost a very similar or the same role in society, which is looking outside, looking at what's going on inside, and then trying to, as honestly as possible, release that from their subconscious, or if they're a creative person particularly, and put it together in some sort of music that perfectly represents what it is that's going on inside their soul, you might say.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask you, like, how do you see the role of a musician? Like, let's look at hundreds of years, thousands of years, the role of a musician in a society. Like, what is that? What are they supposed to be doing here? What are we doing here creating music? What is this whole deal?
Well, yeah, I've given that much thought, again, due to the situation that we're in. It's bothered me. It obviously, we're having existential questions about music and the role of music anyway. I mean, in my darkest moments, I've been convinced that this whole move towards shutting down has been a way of cramping music and silencing it, like it's some dangerous, like this is very useful. Like I say, these are my darkest moments. And then on reflection, and then to turn it on its head, I've been thinking, well, what's my purpose? I mean, it's a very good time to ask this question, because as a musician, you think, well, what's my purpose? I mean, wow, we're living in a world where we all right, you can listen to any musician on Spotify or any streaming service, but is that any use? Is that really all we're worth? Is that our role? And I wrote to my MP. I wrote to my MP and said, like, look, this is in the middle of the summer. I said, look, man, you need us. You got to make some inroads here because people need us. And I'm seeing what musicians do as more and more of a counselling service, and I mean that in the most cryptic, surreal way. It's not like I say, with my music anyway, there are no words here. I mean, you could get more obvious with it. You could think about, a good solid pop tune, which the vast majority of people listen to. They empathise with something within it. They reflect on themselves, and they feel, okay, that's. I relate to that story. I don't feel alone. But I feel that's a very, not to dismiss lyric-led music, but I think that's that's not the purest form. I'm more interested in what music does when it doesn't have those obvious elements. Like literally just playing noise, playing music, playing notes. What is that? What is that doing? And what does it serve up? And sorry, is that you? Is that whistling your end?
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's a beautiful bird outside.
Oh, it's lovely. I was thinking, wow, we've got a new species in the dark here. Here you go. He's playing music for us. How beautiful.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah.
Yeah, he is. Well, there you go. But so I think we're sort of if this isn't too simplistic, I think we're a counselling service. I think that we are music is extremely necessary in dark times, and there have been none darker recently than this. And it's no coincidence that people are running towards that moment when they can have music back. Not just music, of course, all sorts of things that they've been stripped of. But obviously, I'm just concerned with what music has and what music does. Sometimes I think to myself, it's just it's so selfish, this, for me, because I get so much joy from it. And I go, well, get past the fact that you get so much joy from it. You get to see so many places and meet so many people. What is it? Like you say, what is it that we're providing? And I can't think of anything really more profound, particularly, than just this sense that we're there to. Well, I've called my album "Hall of Mirrors." Maybe that's what it is. Maybe we're just holding up mirrors. Maybe we just certainly I've done that during the making of this album. It's a process of using music to look at oneself. We're a bounce back service, counselling. We're reflective. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, what conclusions have you come to? I mean, do you? Well, you have any?
I mean, I really like the trend that we're seeing today, which is moving towards, say, music as a therapy. I mean, music therapy is becoming quite a big thing. And something that you said there, you were talking about what does it mean just to sit down and play notes? Not if you're even not if you're a musician, even just what does it mean to bang things? And that makes me think of something. I'm going to butcher this, but I think Nietzsche said something like this. He believed that he was like one of the last followers of Dionysus, right? So these Dionysian festivals where they would just go around playing this music and everyone's hitting something and clanging things, and it's very therapeutic. And I believe that he thought that the what is it? The forming music into something that is notes on a page and an arrangement and everything like that. I think that he believed that was almost a divorcement from its original purpose, right? Which was to get people together and to, just go crazy for a while and get insane and, allow yourself to hear and play whatever it is that you want to play, and I think that the more we can allow for that kind of experience for people. I mean, look, people get that at a rave, people get that at a crazy, techno concert, or even, I found myself in tears when I was just watching on YouTube, like the proms in Britain, and everybody's singing along, and you think,
Yep.
It's those moments that we're trying to create when all of a sudden nothing else matters other than you just being there, hearing, playing, experiencing what it is that's going on.
Well, that's true, and it's a crude word, but it's very tribal. It's a very tribal thing, and maybe we're pretty basic mammals, really, primates, and maybe there is just this huge comfort in feeling that we are connected to the tribe, and maybe the music is just that vehicle for making it patently obvious. I mean, I've often said to people, I'm not a religious person, but I understand that the thing that people are looking for, I just happen to find it. I find that these heightened states when I'm playing music with other people, I get into that place and I'm elevated, and I go, well, that's the spirit right there. That's the thing that we're looking for. That's that sense of there is a greater power. Now, maybe that greater power is very earth-based. Maybe it's just that sense of, which is what you live. If you live in a city, you don't know who your neighbour is, and you need music to bring these people together and make you feel a part of something. It's lovely what you said there about watching the proms and being at a rave or being at a techno party or anything. I think the purest version of that I ever saw was I was invited to play part of an international music festival in Khartoum in Sudan, in Central Africa. Northern Africa, really. And it was an international music festival, and we were the only international act on it. And it was with my trio, so I needed a piano and a double bass and drums. And they flew us in. We flew across the desert, and we were welcomed in by the British Council, this wonderful Sudanese guy who looked after us. And we stayed in a hotel that had been gifted to the government by Colonel Gaddafi. It was pure, it was just great. All of it was just fantastic, legendary stuff. And then we played in this arena, and they found the only piano in Khartoum. It was an upright woodworm-eaten thing. It was just holding together, and it was out of tune. And the bass player was given a bass where the strings had been so warm that he was cutting his fingers as he was playing. And the drummer had been given pretty much pots and pans. And there was a guy on the side of the stage with a huge, great cable in his hand. It was two sides of the cable. And we realised that he was holding together the power for the entire venue. And he stood there the whole night. And then at the end of the night, it was about 48 degrees. At the end of the night, his arms just wore out, and he just dropped it. And there's a great video of us getting to the end and going, good night. And as we say, the whole arena just went, and the lights went down. And this guy just basically dropped the cables. So it was fantastic. The whole thing was just, just what you want. I mean, the best gigs in the world are that kind of thing where it's just held together and you're in the middle of nowhere. And to be honest, you feel a bit scared. You're just thinking anything could happen. I mean, they drove home the long way, and you're thinking, oh, hang on a minute, where are they taking us somewhere? You get those kind of moments a lot. But then all of a sudden, on the Friday afternoon, they said, come to the centre of Khartoum. We're going to take you and show you something. and we turned up. We turned up at this cemetery in the middle of Khartoum, and it was, I mean, it was a cemetery where, seriously, I mean, the amount of care and attention that had been paid to the deceased, was like, I mean, there were almost hands like hanging out of the blooming graves. It was like really quite crude. But right in the middle of it, there's a Sufi Islamic idol is buried. So one of the great prophets. And on a Friday, whoever these people were, they convene, and it was one of the most moving things I'd ever experienced. As soon as there was this swirl. Everyone wore this green. I don't know why, but they all wore this wonderful green, and there was this swirl of people going round and round, and they were just singing these 8 or 9 lines that they were singing, and it was I've got it on video somewhere, but I couldn't tell you the melody, but they all knew it. And they all went round and round. And in the middle of them, there were whirling dervishes. So there were these kids. There was these young people swirling round, and there was huge, like industrial-sized incense going around. So you just were in this smoke, and it was and then all of a sudden, this kid went past. And he looked. He had a wild look in his eye, and he looked me straight in the eye like that. He looked me straight in the eye, and then he flashed open his mouth like this, like that. And as he did it, it was like about 3 seconds, and I realised he was spinning a razor blade in his tongue. He had this amazing thing. He just went there like that, and this thing went blah, 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 like that, and then went back in his mouth. And he looked at me defiantly, as if to say, "I can do that." I've got the spirit so big, so hard. I can do that. And I went, whoa, bloody hell. And there were guys, spinning out, and the more intoxicating it got, and the more swirly the people got, the more crazy things started happening. Just people just coming out of nowhere and flying at you, and then we all made our way into this tomb where this tomb was, and had people just diving in and out, and people bombing it, and you just thought, this is really dangerous. But it was the most beautiful spirit-led thing. I had no connection, particularly with any of the tenets of this Sufi Islamic movement, but it so didn't matter. It didn't matter one jot. I felt exactly the same thing that they did, I think, and it's also a beautiful lesson. We've been through such turbulent times, cross religion. One religion against the next, and one side of the world against the next. And then when you suddenly realise that someone on the inverted commas other side is connected to the same spirit as you are, you go, oh man, what a waste of energy to have hate or suspicion. It's like, well, it's there. We've all got the same thing. It's just a different brand. It's the same thing. And you go, well, the world is one, and we are one, and we are all humans, and we are all just on the same page, and we're all looking for the same things. It's just wrapped up differently. And that was music. That was it was all about the music. That whole day was I was just intoxicated by this endless riff going round. And it was made possible by that music. Definitely made possible by that music. Yeah. And that's what music does for me.
And I mean, just this idea of everybody being in sync, and people are doing different things, but the whole purpose is they're there together in that experience, right? That sounds amazing. And I think that something that I really take away from what you're saying here is a lot of musicians can be really attached to the, like, I know people who won't play a piano unless it's perfectly in tune, grand piano. I know musicians like that, and I know people who, like, trumpeters especially, we are neurotic beyond belief. We will travel around the world 6 times to find the newest mouthpiece that sounds a little bit better. It's crazy. But some of the greatest experiences I've had with music, similar to yours, have been nothing to do with the exact type of instrument, or nothing to do with anything other than somebody really getting into that spirit that you talk about. One story I may have told on the podcast before, but I just love this, is I was in South Australia for this music festival that James Morrison puts on over here. Is this wonderful multi-instrumentalist over here, and and he puts on this great festival, and he brought Marion Petrescu over, who is this incredible pianist. I've never seen anyone play faster. Very egotistical, but he's hilarious, right? Like, he's so funny, and he's such a beautiful musician. I meant egotistical in the way that he plays fast. He's not egotistical. But anyway, so we're all in this kind of after party for the gig, and there's this crappy old piano, upright piano, and every note is out of tune. There's like 6 notes that are just completely gone. Nothing looks right. And we all kind of go over there, and Marion just sits down and he starts playing this classical piece of music, right? And we're all just gathered around this. If you were snobby, you'd be like, sounds terrible. But all of us were just in a trance listening to him play this crappy piano so beautifully. And I think that scene, similar to what you were talking about, it really taught me what's truly important about music and what actually makes the difference, because I'm not convinced that moment would have been made better by him playing on a grand piano perfectly in tune. I'm not convinced at all. In fact, I think that it enhanced the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I entirely agree. Yeah, I mean, I think, but then you've sort of gone from one level of musicianship to the next, where you are essentially coming to a union with whatever is in front of you. And if I mean, it's hard. I mean, my mother-in-law's piano is an absolute shite heap, but and I go around there, and it's a challenge to play it. But I do sit there and I think, well, find the beauty therein. There is something in there. Quite often I end up playing comedy tunes because that's the only thing that sounds good on it. But if it was a more poignant moment, it would be my delight to challenge myself to make that sound beautiful, and almost yes, all right, bring along your technique that you've been given, but throw it out as quickly and as much as possible. I mean, I think my concern about my classical training was I spent years trying to unpick it. I felt that it took me years to realize how all the good bits about it, but I spent a lot of years thinking, this is a burden, this is stopping me feel, and I needed to get beyond that. I needed to feel directly. And I think I got there, but and I retained all those wonderful things that it gave me. I think, but that is one of the dangers of classical music, is that it can obscure the path sometimes. It's an interesting thing. I'll never come to a conclusion about it really, but it's interesting how music evolves. You can see it happening. We mentioned jazz earlier. You can see it happening with jazz. It's touched upon in the book by David Byrne, where I think, what's that music? It's a big white book, like where music is at. It's not that isn't the title, but it's something like that. And it's an insight into where music is and what it means right now. And one interesting part of it is talking about music's connection with venues, and how music is made with the venue in mind that it is projected to be in. So, and I think that's one of the interesting elements about jazz. There's not that many, but there is one interesting element about jazz, in that it's passage from kind of beer house sort of entertainment music with everyone shouting and screaming over it. I'm talking like 100 years ago, through then into jazz clubs, and now the interesting thing now is it's become this concert hall sort of reverential experience. So jazz, very much that Scando jazz movement was very much about listening to every single note in a beautiful acoustics on instruments. And it's interesting how things become a classical form. I mean, a really hammed up, ridiculous version of that is the tribute band. I think about that with tongue in cheek, and I think actually the tribute band, the Genesis tribute band or the Led Zeppelin tribute band, is actually one step removed from the classical concert. I mean, what is it? If if Mozart is a name that has lived on for centuries, and now we listen to his music reverentially, then why the hell not why the hell will it not be Led Zeppelin? Why the hell will it not be Jimi Hendrix? And why? I mean, it's very interesting to me that you've got tribute bands now who are replicating the light shows from those original shows, trying to replicate it down to the nth degree. These concerts that happened in 1964, and it, it starts out as a sort of something of a joke, but then you think, hang on, this is getting quite serious. We're actually sort of playing this without improvisation and with very tight constraints, and we're imposing these constraints on. We must try and protect the art of what that was. And although it seems rather, to the high-end culture, it seems rather trashy to do such a thing. Given time, it suddenly becomes a classical movement. Like a Led Zeppelin tune can become a moment of classical nature in time, and we may become more and more reverential towards it.
That's a really interesting thought. I never thought about it like that. This idea that 200 years from now we could be, going to the sit down in the, or going back to try and have those exact experiences that people had with Led Zeppelin. And
well, I mean, you got all the things like the orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment in London, which is an orchestra that plays on, as far as I'm aware, they play on original instruments, the old catgut and everything else, trying to recreate that Baroque thing for you. And it's fascinating. You want to go and immerse yourself and just try and picture how it was to be there. And it's rapidly becoming that, I think. It will be in 100 years' time. It will be. Well, let's get those original Jimi Hendrix strings, and it's quite possible. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, who knows? I mean, I even think about something that Miles Davis said in this sort of circumstance. I tend to agree with him on many things. He was brilliant. Obviously, how can you not agree with him? He was prolific. But one of the things that he said was, "Hey, stop calling what I'm doing jazz, because as soon as you label it, now you're going to turn it into something that is something other than something that could be what it is next, right?" And I really think he was really wise in that sense, that he really wanted. I mean, he was the person who was constantly letting whatever was inside him out, and that was the most important thing. Just keep on creating. Don't talk about what I did 10 years ago. Talk about what I'm doing right now and what I'm going to do next. I think one of my favorite lines from him was in that really spacey Honda scooter advertisement that he did. He said, "I'll play it now and I'll tell you what it is later," or something like that. I like that. I really like that. But I really enjoyed the perspective that you have there as well. Just classicalizing this music that we love. But that actually brings.
Sorry, no. Yeah, just to interject, Miles Davis's courage in all things like that, it's just so sort of heroic. Like when he said the counting, where he goes, "I'll count you in." 1, and that's the counting, things like that. It's just magic, and permanently disassembling what he did. I mean, it touches on what we were saying earlier, taking what he had before, taking what he'd done before, and just disassembling it, having the courage to do that. It's quite Bowie-esque, actually. David Bowie was great at that in a pop sense, just disassembling what was before and having a rebirth. And I think that really that's the ultimate in what an artist is supposed to be. But I interjected.
Yeah. No. I agree. It's what have you got to say now? And then I think it was Heraclitus. He said something like, "You never step into the same river twice," right? This idea that we're constantly moving through this flow of life coming at us, right? And the musician is I don't know, supposed to paint a picture of the river at a certain stage. What's next? But I wanted to ask you, just on the topic of listening to these concerts and the way that you talked about trying to hear the particular notes and everything. How do you listen to music? Do you have any sort of tips for the average person out there who might just enjoy music but maybe hasn't been able to develop that kind of you might say that spiritual connection with it? What's your process listening to music?
Well, it's an interesting one. I think if you're a musician and if you're a composer, it's like you remain quite distant from it often. because you don't want to be coloured by it, or you know, I can't. If I'm honest, every night I go to bed, I listen to in my head. I put headphones on and I listen to the most ridiculously soporific ambience stuff. It's almost like I need to palette cleanse every night. I kind of listen to this stuff and it just switches me off, because music I'm the same with film. I'm really frightened to engage with something, because it will affect me so much. I'm worried how it's going to affect me. So it's particularly bad with film. When I watch a film, if I think, oh, this is going to be an emotional ride, I will put it off. I'm like, oh, you know, because I will come out the other side in the role of, you know, I'll feel it so succinctly or so deeply that I won't be able to shake it, and it'll kill my mood, or it'll make me emotional, or it'll make me cross. So I'm kind of I'm a bit frightened of listening to music and how it's going to affect me. But I suppose I give music the respect which I hope, or I try and instill in the people who listen to my stuff. It's not a demand. It's not an edict. But I think just by nature, the music that I try and make, I think that it would be best if people stopped what they were doing and listened to it and immersed themselves in it so deeply that they did do that whole journey with it. It's like I had a French teacher once, and she said, "Oh, I can't listen to your stuff while I'm ironing." And I went, "Oh, okay," you know. And she said, "No, because I just want something to sing along to." I was like, "Okay, yeah." I said, "My music isn't for you," you know. It's like I think I'm for an exclusive breed who just want to completely immerse themselves in it. So I think, to answer your question, I can't help. I have total immersion, like I'm in some sort of flotation tank when it comes to music. I'm looking for the perfect environment. I'm looking for the complete lack of distraction. The radio annoys me. I can't have the radio on sort of feeding me general stuff that someone else has decided. That irritates me. Like I want to control it. It's a very controlling, but this is a reflection on me, not anyone else. But I want it in a very controlled environment, and I want to feel every note. I want to experience every note. I want to, and I want to be excited by it, and I want it to conjure up memories. And it's like, I think smell and sound have these wonderfully evocative elements to them. You can smell something, and you can be instantly sort of transported back. And music can do that to me too. I want it to transport me somewhere. And you know, it's some of the most beautiful music that just has a place in my heart. There's a John Barry piece actually called Fun City. It's from Midnight Cowboy, the soundtrack, with Dustin Hoffman and John Voight, and it's this beautiful piece of, it just floats. And I don't know if I was under the influence of something when I first heard it, but there's always, whenever I listen to it, there are these two hominid beings, a male and a female, and they meet on a cloud, and they're sort of, you know, they're what's the word? You know, they're ape-like. What's the word? Simian. They're simian. So they're quite primitive us. They're primitive beings like us. And they meet on the cloud, and they exude love, and they spin around, and they're on this cloud, and the sun is so bright. The light in this image is so bright, and it's the most intoxicating, beautiful nirvana of two beings just without compromise, expressing love and being happy in their purest form with each other, for each other, and around each other. And there is not an ounce of darkness or sadness or evil or anything else to corrupt it. And I think that's sort of, perhaps that represents the plane that I'm looking to get to in all music that I listen to. I'm looking to get to that place where it is so euphoric that it extinguishes all other any pollution whatsoever. So
Hmm.
yeah, I'm looking for that. I mean, that's quite a full on agenda, but I guess I'm looking for that next something that gets close to that, up that ladder. You know.
Mm. And this might be a good segue into the next question, which is that the same sort of thing that you're looking for when you've finally finished a piece of music that you've composed?
Yes.
Is that where you're looking for? Yeah.
Yes, that's what I'm looking for. And there will be a moment when I will, like any composer, I think there'll be a moment when I'm convinced I've got it. And then there'll be lots of moments where I'm convinced I couldn't be further from it. And then I won't be. And then there's got to be about, I reckon, I'm no word of a lie, I reckon about 10 years before I feel it again. And there's a chance in 10 years' time that I'll listen to it and go, oh, what, that was something, And there's also a chance I'll listen to it and go, right, I can't believe I did that, But that's, it's a mean feast, it's very, very stingy on what it gives you back, composition. It's you get a buzz at the beginning, you get a lot of self-loathing. Then you might get a buzz if you play it to other people and they go, oh, that's great, like particularly in a concert environment. But that's kind of for them and just them sort of making you feel good. It doesn't necessarily make you feel that your composition is anything other than a trickery, but at least they're being tricked, and at least they're that little that shielding you from it. And then there's that little thing in about 10 years' time, maybe even longer, where it might just creep up on you and go, you know what, that was actually really good. That was really, really good. So it's really stingy. It's stingy in the love it gives you back, but it's strangely, I, like many others, am addicted. God knows why.
I'm feeling that judgmental God analogy come back, almost as if you feel like you've been used after you created this piece. I get that. Like, you create this piece of music and then all of a sudden a week later you're like, oh, I've only listened to that 3 times after I composed it. And oh, okay, I don't want to listen to it again. What's next? And
also, it's amazing how dark it can get, how you can really hate it. I mean, not just hate it and yourself because of it. I mean, it can take you over. It's like, oh, yeah, what value am I? Just listen to that drivel, and your perspective, and there's no truth in that. It doesn't matter who you are or how badly a job you've done. There's no, what you're telling yourself is not the truth. It's distorted. But there's no telling you. You're convinced. You go, no, this is it. I'm ashamed of myself. I think I'm going to go and top myself because this is appalling, and it's distorted, and it's really worrying. That it's really intoxicating, and you just have to get away from it somehow and move on. And then the remarkable thing is you come back and you go, I'm not saying you get to that it's great stage, but you go, oh, that's all right. Why was I so hung up on it? Why did I despise myself so much? It's it's punishing. Composition. Who'd do it?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, I mean, even not composing your own stuff. I mean, like I listen to, and this could be because they are genuinely bad albums, but I listened to my albums that I did of just jazz standards and stuff, a few years ago, and I have that experience exactly where you're listening and you just think, I have to shut this off. It's got to go. But then, the thing that always brings me back is just thinking of the number of people who have come up to me after a concert or, come and said to me, hey, listen, I love your music, or, I really appreciate what you did there, or, people get it. And I think that we need to realize that we don't see, hear, smell, or think the same as anybody else. And likely they enjoy something about what you've done, But
do you believe them when they say that?
Well, I do sometimes when it feels genuine. I can always tell when it's kind of like, hey, good on you, jazz musician. And I don't know, maybe that comes from my time spent busking on the street, like you get a sense for, people's generosity. And, but yeah, I think, no, I think you bring up a really good point, which is that you can hear that, but ultimately, do you actually think that? And I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how it transfers over.
I've got a theory about what is a good gig to the likes of us, and what is a good gig to the audience, and I think they're two very different things. I've often gone back to my hotel room after a gig, and felt like I've done a 90% good gig,
Mm.
and wanted to just roll up in a ball and die. But I'm convinced that 90% good gig is 100% good for the audience, because firstly, they've got nothing to measure it against. Secondly, as someone very simply put it, hey man, you're out of the house, you're seeing someone else do something, you get to relax for an hour, But nothing is worse for me than what you illustrated there, when someone comes up and goes, yeah, nice one, and your standard is, I mean, I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing, but I kind of, the only way I'll believe it is if they come up and just sort of, I suppose, in a twisted way, I want them to sort of fall at my feet and go, oh my God, oh my God, you've just moved, the world has changed for me thanks to that concert, and sometimes, you get people who are like genuinely like lost, and they go, wow, you get quite close to it. But that's your marker, that's your marker, and that feels like something. But if someone comes up and goes, yeah, nice one, man, and then walks off, you go, oh my God, what? I am shit, I'm shocking. I just want to die, because you don't mean that. It's me. That's a mediocre response. And I've set the bar high. So why on earth would that feed me? It's just like, now I know it's really bad if they're doing that, because that's the level I expect. I've had that sort of, I've had those people go and go, oh Jesus, and that's it. It's got to be that then. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah. You've had a taste for being a prophet of music, and
But I think even then, I think even the people who come up and go, nice one, it's great, I think they've had a great time. I think it's only it's only us that go that can't bear to live anymore after something like that. But it's probably an 85% good gig, and that's perfectly adequate. And I think the mark of any good musician is to keep it up in those top couple of top 10%, top 20%. I think probably that the mark, the margin of error is quite small, actually. When you get to a certain level, you certainly didn't do anything that was drivel, but you've got these high expectations now, and you won't do.
But I like this idea of divorcing your own perspective from what you reckon the audience will be feeling, because you're so right. Like, a 90% effort, even if I make one slightly major mistake in a concert or so, that's all that I'll think about, right, when I finished it. But man, you made me think of I really like that you have this kind of system of, this is what a good gig is, and it when you see it, because like there's this running joke that I always do at every one of my jazz concerts, and that's all I really do. When I do a concert, it's going to be jazz standards with my quartet, and I love to do that because it's free and we have a great time. The audience has a great time. But I have this joke where I tell the audience, listen, if you were in a classical concert right now, you would be silent throughout the whole piece, and then you would give an applause at the end. But a jazz club is different, right? I say, like, if you hear something that you really love, you can pretty much make any sound that you want. It could be a bird sound, an animal sound, some sort of grunt, some sort of and then I just get the audience to make these stupid sounds, right? But that's really, for me, like, I noticed that is really the sign for me when I know that the gig is going really well. When I hear somebody from the back row just go, right in the middle of me playing something, you're like, that feeds you, you know that it's like this Dionysian sound coming out of them, this animalistic response, right?
Yeah. Yeah, an involuntary thing. They just can't help themselves. I mean, who in their right mind would do that in public? You know, unless
Yeah.
they were being swept away with something.
Yeah.
And
Oh, you couldn't make those sounds on the street. If you did, you'd be taken away immediately. But a jazz club, it's absolutely fine. Please make all
yeah.
of the weird sounds you want. Yeah.
Like, again, another cathartic reason for doing music is people could make animal sounds to their heart's content, and it's okay. You know.
Yeah.
It's a,
Yeah.
it's, I mean, that's the epitome of improvisation. That my dear friend Rex Horan from Perth, Western Australia, the bass player in the trio, he used to say that about improvisation. To put very simply, it's like if we're having a conversation, all you have to do is say yes. You know, if I ask you any question and you say yes back, that means the possibilities are endless. If you say no, then that's the end of the conversation, and that's what improvisation or exposition or rather what's the word? Not exposition. Like trading off any kind of music, feeding and drawing from music is about. It's about saying yes symbolically. Metaphorically saying yes to everything, and if you say no and you go, "Whoa, no," I mean that's the end of the conversation. You know, there is no more to be said. It's about you're putting yourself in a music. Music puts you in an environment where you better say yes to everything. I mean that takes the control away for starters. It's a hell of a roller coaster ride. If you say yes to everything, it's like Johnny Dice. You know the story of the guy who threw a dice and decided how to live his life by the throw of a dice. In music, you're putting yourself in a position where you have to say yes. That's an incredibly liberating and a scary thing all at the same time. But you got no choice, because if you say no, you might as well get off.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a perfect example of that is like when you're playing a jazz standard or an improvisation and somebody's doing a solo, and all of a sudden two musicians in the band, find themselves out of time with the other musician or something like that. There's always one musician who just decides, nope, I'm sticking where I'm not gonna try and fix the situation. You better come to me, right? And that's the sort of ego that just doesn't belong in that setting, right? Like I really like what you're saying. It's exactly like life. Like life is going to throw things at you, and what are you going to do? You're just going to say no to life? No, you got to go with it. You got to accept it and move on, right?
Well, that's what is so incredibly life enhancing about music is just these endless possibilities. Not just in music, but there's just a permanent there's a permanent excitement of what may be. You never know what's coming. I mean, surely but by definition, being a musician it scares the life out of a lot of people. But surely by definition that being a musician is not knowing what's coming next, either financially for starters, but professionally, anything. Any day is like, well, this is a new day and anything can happen, and it runs right down to the basic root of just playing music. It's like anything can happen in the next 5 minutes. That's so exhilarating. You really feel like you're nose to nose with the essence of life when you do that. The more you can do that, and when you're rid of it, when you're denied it, it feels like life is so dull. It's everything is just grayed out. It's like you need to. Life isn't once you've tasted it, it's not worth living unless you're right close to the edge. It doesn't mean being dangerous, but it just means like, possibilities. And the way that all the best parties are the ones that happen last minute. All the best holidays are the ones that you don't plan. And music has the capacity to be like that all the time. And I've seen it do it. And one of the most heartbreaking things of this summer, because we've been unable to do so much for so long now, was I was so desperate to have a gathering of people. And I've got a little, just out the back here, there's this field that all the houses around here communally have access to. And we have little gatherings out there, or we used to anyway. And I decided in the middle of July, when the rules were at their most relaxed, I just went, oh, come on, we'll throw something together. And I threw it together, and I set up a pair of decks, and I did some pod DJing. And then I got my soul band round, and we played a set, and people came out, and we were dancing, and it was great. And I thought, well, yeah, I've made something happen in the old style, you know, in the musical style. I've made something happen. This is a gathering. It's a coming together. It's a happening. And then someone in my village here felt empowered to shut us down. They felt that they had the muscle to do that because of the situation. They could say things like, "This is illegal. I will call the police." It wasn't. It wasn't. We were doing a nice thing. It was very safe, and it was going to be finished by 8:30 at night. It was so sociable. It was ridiculous. But I just wanted that feeling, and everyone wanted to just let their hair down. But the downside of this current situation is there's a lot of rhetoric and there's a lot of protocol that people can quote and use to get in the way of that feeling of life. And you know, to give it, it's just not desserts, but to give it it's true backing, it's true meaning. Of course, there are safety reasons. Of course, you know, I have to bow to that as well. One has to bow to that, but. You know, the thing that hurts me, aside from any implications of the virus itself, the thing that hurts me in the heart is the fact that there are powers around to stop you doing those things and stop you communing and stop you feeling that happiness, and that's crippling. So I just cannot wait to be out of the other side so that I can feel that very exciting, very edgy, very spontaneous feeling again that you get from music and all its trimmings.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful place to, you know, kind of wrap up this conversation, because I mean, it's exactly the kind of message that I've been thinking is so necessary to bring out into the world after all of this, which is come back to gathering, come back to culture, come back to music, come back to art, come back to the things that transcend this often seemingly, you know, meaningless existence. There's so many things that get in our way, I guess, of seeing what is truly important. And you know, when you have those kinds of experiences, like, yeah, I mean, like last year I just had a complete transformation in the way that I saw culture and music, and I had done like most of my music degree. I can't believe that I never felt the way that I started to feel last year. And so your music was a huge part of that. You know, Hall of Mirrors coming out, I believe it's in March. I don't know if you know that, but yeah.
I think you're right. March the 4th. I think, yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah. But I'm going to be spruiking that out to my audience as well, because I love the one song that I have heard. I know that the rest of the album is going to blow my mind, and I can't wait for it. And hopefully we get to have another conversation soon.
Oh, I'd love to. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thanks for being patient with me. And it's light where you are and dark where I am, and that's
yeah.
It's definitely a cross-global conversation. It's been a lovely thing. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Neil. Hey there, YouTubers. I just wanted to let you know that if you love this episode and you'd like many more just like it, then you can head to patreon.com/Simon J.E. Drew. There you'll get access to exclusive episodes that haven't been released yet, as well as many other benefits. Also, if you'd like to work one-on-one with me in my coaching practice, then you can head to simonjedrew.com/coaching. Talk to you soon.